And so I would want to challenge the team to ask, how useful is these 4 questions to capture what we call internal migration in Kenya? Could we capture more? In 2019, we captured information on the reason for migration, and that automatically adds value to the quality of data we are collecting. So one of the things we are pushing for is that we capture more relevant information on the migrants that can help us explain the process of internal migration in the country. So another way we are thinking about strengthening the internal migration data is questioning our statistical system. So our statistical system, which is designed by the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics, has a frame that is used to capture information on the population. So we need to critically assess, is this system ensuring coverage and completeness of data? So I might remind people that in the earlier years, we're not able to capture information on the Northeastern province. And you'd go into statistical reports and find empty information on Northeastern province. But now we need to capture the entire country. So we have to question if the system is there to allow us to do this. And beyond capturing the data, also checking on the quality of data. And so we are asking, within the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics, would there be value in having a specialized unit focusing on capturing migration data? So we are looking at maybe strengthening things by suggesting the introduction of a unit focusing on migration at the Bureau of Statistics. Another way in which we strengthen our data systems is in application. How are we analyzing it? So internal migration data has been analyzed, and you will find in academic institutions very many reports from students. And in the earlier period, with our colonial masters, they did a lot of work on migration. But systems and techniques are changing. The models currently being used on analyzing internal migration data are largely borrowing from Western models. And we do understand that there's something unique about the African migration system. We move around a lot more, maybe short, frequent movements. We have ties that someone like Professor Ucho called the linkages between urban and rural areas. Are these captured in the models that we use to analyze internal migration data? Then you look at the capacity to collect and to analyze. How many specialists do we have who specifically look at migration in the country? So we do have our Institute of Population Studies churning out students, but you might find there's a higher prevalence for the other dynamics like fertility and mortality, and little concentration on migration. So there is need to build this capacity within such institutions like PSRI and others in the country, so that we have a larger team of people supporting generation and analysis of internal migration data in the country. Another way would be by looking at the institutional engagement around internal migration. We note that there are very limited institutional engagements, but we do acknowledge at the larger global migration governance discussion and discourse, we have the National Coordinating Mechanism, the NCM, that is domiciled at the Department for Ministry of Interiors and at Nyayo House, and they bring together several stakeholders dealing with migration in the country, because migration affects crossing borders. And so there's all these other specialist institutions that are part of the team that is at NCM. But we need to strengthen this, because with devolution, we now have the counties as key stakeholders. And we feel that there's been limited engagement with the county governments in as far as migration issues are concerned. Then the utility of the data at these lower levels would also be a positive thing. So right now, we have seen with the experience of COVID that counties are now reporting cases, and we do know the association between COVID and mobility. The disease came from another region, and through international migration, it spread around the world. And within countries, as people move from place to place, the positivity rate increases. So we need to have, even at the county levels, information on how people are moving in and out of these counties, right? So within ministerial departments, and to have stakeholders at those lower levels, the subnational levels, who are demanding for and using these internal migration data.
Mary, you should be winding up now. You could be summarizing.
Okay. So we hope that the data is also disaggregated to suit the needs. I think you saw the graph I shared earlier that talks about provinces. That is not going to be very useful in a dispensation where we are planning for counties. So we are proposing that we have further disaggregation beyond gender, urban rural settlements, even to the subnational units, different social economic groups. And there is new innovative revolution in data collection and analysis, technological systems of collecting data, geographic analysis. We have ArcGIS, where people are doing spatial analysis. You can see a map like we saw of the distribution of fertility rates around the country. So we are asking for diversification and revolution of data. And so also to ask for the stakeholders to do a lot more in advocacy. So as I finish, I was just trying to give you a landscape of where we are. And I think if we take into account some of these actions we propose, we might strengthen collection and use of internal migration data. The data we have has to be analyzed and further disaggregated. We have to share data amongst stakeholders. We have a policy on migration that is almost being finalized. We ask that it is adopted to actually set the framework for implementation of some of these proposals we are making. We are specifically asking if there is a migration unit that can be established within our statistical system, and to ask all stakeholders, in terms of planners and all partners, to mainstream migration in development planning. All the CIDPs, special plans for counties, need to factor in migration data. And for data to be strong, timely, we are proposing that we need to think about having our own migration specialist surveys like we do for fertility and mortality. So where we have at least every 5 years some fresh data that gives us the current trend of effects. So with those few points, I hope I have persuaded you enough on some of the ways in which we can strengthen internal migration data in Kenya. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mary, for that very focused and informative discussion on internal migration. Very relevant indeed. Next, we will pack our questions and clarifications to when all the speakers have made their presentation. Next, I want to introduce our colleague, Dr. Luchetu Likaka. Dr. Likaka is a researcher and a lecturer in criminal justice and security management at the African Nazarene University. He holds a bachelor's and a master's degree from Egerton University and a PhD in criminology from the University of Witwatersrand, South Africa. He had participated in conferences, seminars, and workshops, and executed training and research consultancies, both at the local and national level, for state and non-state organizations. He has authored papers in international journals, books, and book chapters. He is formerly a senior researcher with the National Crime Research Center, a state corporation. He is a member of the Global Initiative Against Transnational Organized Crime, and also a member of Africa Security Sector Network, ASSN. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome our colleague, Dr. Likaka. 10 minutes, please, if not less.
Good afternoon, everyone. Can I share my screen, please?
Proceed.
If Mary can stop sharing, then I can share.
Mary, you can stop sharing so that you give chance to our colleague to also share. Okay, thank you. Likaka, please, you can now share.
Are you able to see my screen?
Well done, proceed.
Thank you so much. Colleagues, one of the interesting areas when you look at mixed migration is actually the complexity that human trafficking and smuggling brings in. Why is it so? It's because you note that mixed migration is actually bringing in a whole range of many people moving across the counties, across the borders to other different areas. And Kenya has been noted to be indeed a critical hub where it attracts a lot in terms of mixed migration, both internally with these ones who are moving from one county to another county after the promulgation of the Constitution, and also those ones who are moving from Kenya to other countries. And again, this has reflected so much when you talk about the number of people who are migrating. As you can see, especially there are several challenges for those ones going to the Middle East. And despite all this, many of other people, again, traveling from Somalia and Ethiopia all the way to South Africa because people are looking for economic and physical well-being. When we look at a mixed migration, just picking up from what my colleague Mair has mentioned, it will bring in a range of several areas, including those irregular migrants moving here and there, those ones not using the right channels because of the aspirations that they want to achieve. The refugees, you can see those ones who have come in from Somalia, from South Sudan, asylum seekers, those ones coming from different countries. Recently, we have had those ones from Tanzania. Talking about victims of trafficking, particularly around the Great Lakes region, and also from Kenya to other countries. And this one brings in the issue of now those ones who are going in for domestic work, those ones who are going in for forced labor, and even sexual exploitation. And then we have the other component in terms of the stateless persons. Particularly, you've noted that the other, I think it's this last year when the Makonde were actually granted the citizenship of Kenya. And of course, we have the challenge in terms of many people who are actually stateless. You remember some of the cases that have been reported by media around the airport. Then we have unaccompanied minors. Children are always on the move, but then who are actually accompanying them? How are they protected so that they actually don't get vulnerable? Now, the complexity comes in when you talk about how then do we define smuggling and trafficking? Look at this vis-a-vis mixed migration. People are moving for several reasons. And therefore, this becomes an area of interest for anybody interested in the population, particularly issues of smuggling and trafficking, because as the dynamics change in terms of socioeconomic well-being, people are moving to look for a livelihood. That provides an opportunity that it's now easy for those ones who are preying on the victim to actually take advantage of that. Particularly if you consider the UN report in 2018 talking about the challenge we are facing from Somalia, Ethiopia, and those ones who are passing through Kenya. And you note every now and then we have got our authorities arresting several of these Ethiopians crossing over to go to South Africa. Again, there's that kind of advantage that is taken by those who are actually involved in this trade to traffic a number of these people through Kenya. Locally, we have those ones again coming in from the different parts of Kenya, particularly Western, or these days is almost every other county, because people are moving for so many reasons, and that providing an opportunity indeed for crime to thrive. Why? Because the fact that several reasons and different categories are moving, and there is an opportunity because as you find massive numbers of people moving, it creates that opportunity for people to prey on them, even if it is from poor economic background or those ones who are looking for other opportunities in terms of economic well-being. Why smuggling? Smuggling becomes a big issue because when you consider Kenya, particularly internally and also externally, we've had a number of children, particularly women and also young girls, trafficked from neighboring countries. And internally here, those who have actually been smuggled from one part, you remember those cases from Mumias all the way to coastal region. This has actually affected the whole component in terms of mixed migration flows and the geographical position of Kenya in the region. If you look at our porous borders, you look at the relativity in terms of how we control our borders and the mechanisms inside here, then how are they actually affecting or encouraging issues of smuggling? And I've mentioned even this particularly if you consider the challenge we face as a country in terms of corruption. In 2020, we are ranked number 124 out of 179. And corruption also plays a role, especially when it comes to people who are actually smuggling. I've mentioned about Somalis, the Ethiopians, to an extent South Sudanese, and also Eritreans who actually come from the neighboring countries, and they take advantage of our porous borders. They cross over by foot, by vehicle, those ones even coming at night in Mombasa and all that. And they're actually facilitated by brokers who actually make a lot of money. And this is something that is not very encouraging, especially when you consider the mixed migration challenges. We may not have accurate data, especially those ones transitioning through Kenya in terms of smuggled traffic. But then it is estimated that around 20,000 Somalis and Ethiopians, particularly the main migrants, were actually smuggled to South Africa via Kenya. They're actually smuggled to South Africa via Kenya almost every year. If you consider in terms of trafficking, the other factor that comes in is that despite the laws and the efforts that have been put in place by our government, we have many actors here posing a big challenge when it comes to mixed migration. If you talk about those ones who are the people on the ground who recruit the agents, and then the truck drivers, the transporters, those people are using the boats, like for example, around Lake Victoria, or those ones who are actually trafficking Indians or Asians who come in at night, and even those ones who are forging documents assisted by some of our officials, the challenges we have in terms of border security, and then refugees, all this chain in terms of all apparatus within the criminal justice system. And we're talking about nearly 70% of these migrants from our statistics that at least one part of the migration journey, they have actually used as smuggling. So you can see the challenge. And locally, you have all these victims from all kind of parts of the country. And you're looking at those ones, for example, men because of labor, women, girls, and lately, we also have a challenge when it comes to the boy child. Cities like Nairobi, Mombasa, and Kisumu have actually been cited severally in terms of trafficking when it comes to children, particularly because of labor. Those ones also have been brought in from Tanzania and other countries who are forced into begging and forced marriages for those ones who are coming from the frontier counties of northern Kenya and coming to Nairobi. You remember the kind of tourism that people come for sexual tourism. This is actually a big challenge, and I've highlighted some of these ones there to help us think through in terms of mixed migration. And therefore, it remains a growing concern.
Summarizing, Dr.
It remains a growing concern that then how can we target the perpetrators and then ensure that we separate the perpetrators from the victims? And this is a problem that probably, if you look at the challenges we are facing in terms of the varied factors, the borders, the corruption, the insufficient funding within several agencies, the capacity for us even to fight human trafficking and smuggling, there are uneven laws. Then how can we collaborate with different agencies to deal with the extraditing the human trafficking suspects? And then how can we actually strengthen, for example, the ODPP? Very often they'll want to use the Immigration Act as opposed to Anti-Trafficking Act in terms of prosecution. These are concerns. In terms of recommendation, I've talked about the collaboration with the different partners. This is the only way. If you talk about the government, the NGOs, and the academia coming together to see how we can address challenges to do with human trafficking and smuggling, vis-a-vis the dynamics of mixed migration, which is beyond the singular in terms of trafficking and smuggling. Again, community structures. Remember all this starting from at the lowest level in terms of the community. Then how can we actually work to see that all counties can grow in terms of socioeconomic integration, take care of people so that actually they don't keep on getting uprooted and moving on to look for the better services. In my conclusion, I've mentioned about the coordination for different agencies. They need to implement the objectives, particularly the global impact for migration that have been adopted by Kenya. And even today, appreciating some of these targeted responses when it comes to COVID-19. On that point, I think I'll wish to stop there because the key thing will lie in how can we therefore strengthen our investigation, prosecution, and conviction of the traffickers, vis-a-vis collecting data, which my colleague has mentioned. How can we increase data collection and data sharing for decision-making when it comes to enforcement and identification of victims?
Thank you, Dr. Likaka, for that informative presentation. Indeed, raising issues of, when you talk about smuggling, this raises issues of crime, security issues, concerns, disease issues, health issues, certainly also come into play. A very important presentation, I must say. Next, then we want to invite our colleague engineer.
Thank you very much, Engineer Mairura. I would wish also to share my screen so that is it visible?
Yes, that's okay. Proceed, engineer.
So thank you very much. As you well know, I am the Acting Director General for the Nairobi Metropolitan Area Transport Authority. I'm going to put my stopwatch, Chairman, so that I can utilize my 10 minutes.
Correct.
One, in the morning, we had the story, the opening remarks by Dr. Demora Olajide, who said population policy is about development and people-centered agenda, which requires comprehensive consultative process and is evidence-based driven, and that is also the spirit within the development agenda around transportation. And Chair, my topic was opportunity, challenges, and lessons learned in the design of motorized and non-motorized transport in Kenya. I've been in the infrastructure sector for over 32 years, and this issue to do with roadway design and also urban space design has been what I've done for all those years. I will do a very quick presentation. Most of them will be pictures. I have about 7 issues. I will introduce issues mobility, the history of planning in Nairobi, the opportunities we have, and of course the challenges, and then the lessons learned. And I tend to go straight away to my first slide. That is Mamagena Street. It was not like this before. It is now like this. It has multimodal issues that people are walking, there are people parking, there is motorized traffic, and these are good lessons from Nairobi. First, we must understand that since independence, our network, road paved network, has been growing from 1,800, currently at 14,000. And we know this has, of course, attracted mobility. And as the other presenter said, mobility is the map of all the consumption of trips for different needs, and trips are consumed on purpose because they also contribute to our socioeconomic environment. And of course, transportation is a question of quality of life. As you all know, we are all configured to consume transportation, and that is why we are 50% legs. And therefore, the opportunities and challenges that have been presented with this growth in paved network are issues related to how we provide for walking, cycling, transit, cars, parks, streets, and sidewalks, with partnerships and expertise and experience from around us, and also consumed from a lot of work that has been done before. If we look at Nairobi, its growth structure was more economic based, agreed around street pattern that is like a square pattern, and is a reservoir of several routes that are trickling down to the city, based basically on the colonial ratio influence of Africans, Asians, and Europeans, with the Uhuru Highway and the railway being shelters, a shielding infrastructure to control movement. However, by 1963, with independence, a lot of people came, and this is where the word migration is coming in from Mary. And then 70s issues of population distribution to Dadora, Kayore, and sprawled settlements a little away from the center to reduce on settlements close to the CBD. So planning the city, Nairobi is basically based on the initial master plan of 1948, had zoning of residential, industrial, and other areas and commercial areas. And the road system was basically proposed to have an access and an easy exit of traffic into the city center, and beyond to cross the center using the various CBD junctions. Access to west of Uhuru Highway, associated junctions on the University Way, City Hall, Kenyatta Avenue, Hirserasia. And there was an inadequate means of traffic circulation within the city. And as volumes grow, we are seeing their capacities exceeded. So the opportunities we've been having is that there is currently now a public transport authority, of which I am the current acting director general, called the Nairobi Metropolitan Area Transport Authority. Is a great opportunity to have one public transportation authority around the metropolis, so that issues planning, because I want to propose that mobility is about planning. Human migration and mobility is also about infrastructure. And the planning aspect of land use must always have in it embedded a transportation plan. We have several plans, we have institutions in place, and we have issues emerging like climate change, physical, mental health, safety, quality of service, access, culture, technology. These things are great opportunities to plan motorized and non-motorized traffic. Metropolitan region, those 5 counties. If you look at those 5 counties, growth in population coming to almost 10.4 million. If you look at the statistics of 2009, was just basically about 7.5, 3 million more people in 10 years. We are going to continue growing. The trends are there. Population is growing 4% per annum. The demand for travel by 2030 is 6 million coming into the city, 6 million people exiting in the evening. We look at the modal split. Many people are walking, over 40% on paratransit and buses. Only 13%. We can actually say 13% of us are actually using motorized transport. So ourselves, we are saying for effective utilization of road space, we must focus on public transport and non-motorized transport that account for 80% of the consumption of trips within the area. So we have challenges. We have encroachment, we have vandalism, and people are not owning infrastructure and space for mobility in a patriotic way. And we have institutional complexities, issues to do with data, correction, management, storage, analysis, and modeling. All these issues are not well coordinated. So we are saying we have illegal parkings. People are driving on pedestrian walkways. We are having lack of proper regulations and enforcement. But then with these challenges, planning will be able to solve all this. So I've given you a lot of pictures. One is that as we continue to build more roads, more people are coming into the road space. It's not a solution. Let us plan for sustainability, lessons learned. So sustainability is non-motorized traffic, is cycling, is intermodality, is integration, is utilizing the mobility assets more prudently. Let us share equity and space through having a justice of sharing the space with all modes, walking, cycling, transit on buses and motor cars. Some of the facilities developed in the past, lessons learned, ineffective and very inefficient provisions like non-motorized space that is unsafe. People are vetting on our streets. Bridges are occupying pedestrian streets, power posts and all that. These are things that are lessons learned. Good designed for all space. This is in Dar es Salaam. These designs, street designs must be adopted. We must consult people, the industry, the people who are providing the service. Participation is king. We must think together. We must study so that we are undertaking surveys. We know how people are traveling. We are able to show the patterns of travel. We are able to actually discuss how people transfer and consume one trip, maybe with different modes. We must design routes that address demand centers. We must utilize data so that we can actually configure our investment. We are now doing this section of Ruiro to national hospitals. We are demarcating that corridor for a dedicated bus rapid transit service. We will be seeing bridges, overhead bridges, new stations coming up. Watch this space at Kasarani Sports Center. We are configuring pedestrian walkways for maximizing on mobility. We are talking rail city and integration of other modes like commuter rail station, developing a line to the airport. We are discussing issues of transforming space like this, which is Moi Avenue, into a space like this that is modern, serving people, improving quality of life, and development being people-centered, focused, and investment sustainable to the next generation. Thank you, Chairman. I beg to submit.
Thank you very much, Engineer. Thank you very much for that very informative and precise presentation. It's always exciting when the presentation has also images, photographs. It makes the presentation more lively and focused. Thank you very much, the speakers, for that. I think now we are open. Lucy, is it 1:30 that we must stop now that we had lost a lot of time to start? Is it 1:30 the hour? Lucy Kimondo, is it 1:30 the hour that we must stop? Otherwise, as we wait for that advice, the session is now open for Q&A, observations, questions, and answer session. And as you ask your question, as you raise any of the observations, maybe you can also say who that is directed to among the panelists, the three panelists. That will make the responses much more focused and quickly. Thank you. So the session is now open for Q&A, as it were. Who is the first to go? By raising your hand, I think that would be the best way. Maybe I can start off. From, yes, I can see Kiprotich. Yes, somebody else, Kiprotich, proceed so that we save time. Kiprotich, Bernard.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Me is just to thank the facilitators. At least it has been informative, and I really appreciate. We have really learned a lot. Thank you. I don't have any question.
Okay, thank you very much for that compliment. Any other observation and question? Maybe I've got one immediately. I think when you now look at the presentations done by the three presenters, and when you also now combine the issues of population and transport and therefore mobility, one always asks this question. There is always what one might refer to, in particular for the big cities like Nairobi, there is a huge difference between the day and night population. And that certainly becomes a nightmare. Now, speaking not as an engineer, but speaking as a town planner, there is always that challenge that what you pick from the population census that will normally capture the night population, okay, that is completely different, okay, and I'm told it could be double, okay, the number of day population, the number of people move into the city of Nairobi during the day is quite a huge number. How do we get to capture this issue of population day and night for big cities? I'm not very sure about the other small cities, but the picture could be the same. But I think the phenomena becomes very critical for a city like Nairobi, because I know people travel every morning from Nyeri all the way to Nairobi to work, and in the evening return. Others even bring their children to school in Nairobi and go back with them in the evening. Mary Muyonga, maybe?
Thank you, Bwana Omwenga. You asked a very important question, and it really reinforces why I said we need to move beyond relying on the census, because it's not just that it captures people who are there at that night, but 10 years ago. So I think we can overcome that challenge by really focusing on innovative ways of collecting mobility data. And if we have a specialist unit at the KNBS that does that, it will support the work of engineer and yourselves as you plan counties. Right now, we are doing a lot of urbanization. Urbanization is happening in the counties. So I would suggest that we improve by creating new opportunities to collect data through surveys and other short-term quick methods to enable you to plan better. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much. Any other observation? Any other observation from the? Yes, yes, I think I can also see on the chat, Miriam Wandia, to everyone, she asked, how do we make our counties more attractive so that the bulge in the population happening in the cities can be reduced? This is from Miriam Wandia to everyone. I think either, yes, Mary or any of the panelists, I think, can also respond to that, because even for the engineer, I think when you have also got an improved transport system, then you're allowing people to move very easily also. Right. Engineer, you want to take it first?
Yeah, thank you so much, Engineer Omwenga. I think one is that when we talk about data, I think as Madame Mary says, we have an opportunity in utilizing the digital capacity now in the world, like Google Matrix, and we can be able to capture mobility, movements day and night, and we can be able to move from these 10-year census issues also by digitizing census and making counties attractive. I think we have already started that in Kenya. First started with the devolution. And with the devolution working, then there will be able to have attractors like business and work opportunities. It is critical that the infrastructure also is improved in every county, so that then the quality of life then is improved in the counties. People coming to the cities are basically looking for good schools, for good work opportunities, and also leisure. And therefore, let us make counties attractive through infrastructure revamping and renewal and good development plans, because the way most of our secondary cities and secondary towns are developing is in an unplanned way. But the window of county integrated development plans, this over time will transform counties. We have great hope, Chairman, and this will happen.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Engineer, for that. Lucy, you wanted to say something? Lucy, I can see your mic is on. Lucy, Mondo?
Yes, thank you. I first wish to appreciate the presenters. It was very informative. But I have a question to Engineer Gitau. When we look at our country, and I want to look at the conurbation, I mean around the Nairobi conurbation, we know, like in the morning, we have a lot of people moving from, we call the surrounding counties the bedroom of Nairobi. And it was alluded to that the population of Nairobi during the day is different from the population of Nairobi during the night. How is it that to convince the policymakers even to make decisions, we need to have this data? And he has alluded that we can use the Google map to do this. How possible is it? Can we even think of putting, like the way they do in the developed world, that, you know, this number of vehicles have passed in this area, this number of people have passed in this area? How can we capture that data every day so that we can use it for planning purposes, so that we don't wait, as we have said, we don't wait for censuses? Over. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Engineer?
I have shared the mobility data. Can you see it?
Yes, we can see it.
Yeah, so now what we are packaging in the sector, which is just not about infrastructure, it is a sector that has commonality of investment in terms of data correction. That means the Ministry of Interior, Infrastructure, Housing, we are packaging an intelligent transport system. And this package, we have started with creating what we call an ITS master plan. The master plan has 3 levels. One, it has the level that we call local ITS, and that is the capacity of counties like Nairobi to do traffic management, and also police to continue with their surveillance and security. Then we will lift it up to the level that is sector level, and that sector level are different sectors. But for us, we are more concerned about what we call car and road package. I know other institutions like Interior will have security and intelligence. We want to embed it in all distributive networks. It is an investment plan. It takes a long time. In the developed world, Korea, Japan, everywhere, it has taken decades. Kenya must purpose to invest in intelligence, and the technology is there. We have been on the desk for more than 3 years. We are moving towards implementation. Our first ITS package is coming with the development of corridor number 5, which is Outer Ring Road, which will be a dedicated bus rapid transit corridor. We shall be having a traffic control center. And again, on Thika Road, as we finish the BRT corridor, we'll have a bus management center. It is systems, it is software, it is training, it is planning, it is investment. And that is being done even by the direction of our head of public service in an integrated way, multi-agency, and also institutions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Lucy, did you advise us how much time we have? Is it half past the hour?
I can see we have 34 minutes remaining. So we are not doing badly in time.
So we are running up to.
I'm looking at the clock. After 34 minutes, we'll be returned to the main room.
Okay. So that will be about 2. Okay, then I think okay, so we have got a few minutes. So those who have, yes, more observations. Yes, Dr. Likaka.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that for us also to ensure that counties are doing very well in terms of infrastructure, we also need to take care of crime. And of course, we realize that the mandate in terms of security remains with the national government. However, for you to attract investors in your county, you need also to ensure you, as a county government, you work around issues to ensure that crime actually goes down. Therefore, going forward, there may be a need for the county government to consider strongly playing that role so that you can continue attracting investors in terms of in your county, based on the fact that everybody will want to put his money where there's safety. I thank you.
Okay, thank you. The issues of security is important. Issues of crime, very relevant indeed. Any other observation? Any other observation?
Could I say something, Chair?
Yes, from Muyonga, yes.
I think one of the things that, given that we rushed through our presentations, but one of the things that we have observed, and this follows up to Miriam's comment or question, you know, traditionally in the past, we had lots of movement into the main cities, you know, Nairobi, Mombasa, as has been alluded to. But when you analyze the flows right now, you know, you are starting to see the importance of the secondary cities. We're already having suburbanization. So already with the metropolitan development that the government of Kenya has taken, it's going to help to improve the planning and service delivery for migrants and other people living in these towns. But we need to anticipate the growth of urban spaces across the country. So it would be very important, you know, to have town planners, because I have also engaged with the World Bank on some of this work. You need to have the town planners, the demographers, other social scientists planning around that, so that it's not in small cocoons where the universities are only focusing on the census. We have Engineer Gitau and his team being asked to deal with the day-to-day issues. So we need to expand the stakeholders and really, you know, move forward, anticipating what we can see as further urbanization within the country in the next 5 or so years. So I thought that was something I could add, but there are very many differentials and very many new areas. Kajiado, which is largely rural, but Kajiado is really becoming a main attraction for migrants. And another thing you can do is just look at the numbers of COVID. And if you track the COVID numbers, you will be seeing the most urban spaces in the country. So those were just my 3 points.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Mary. Now, something that is also the need to work together indeed and in an integrated manner, and also engineer did allude to that. All of us need to work together. And indeed, the issue of urban growth is now not just affecting Nairobi, but all over now the country. You see the massive urban sprawl, okay? You just need to get out of Nairobi city into Kajiado, into Kiambu, you know, everywhere, okay? You actually find there is very massive urban sprawl into the very rich agricultural areas. Now, one of the other items that is important, and this I pick it from where Mary you left it, in terms of improving the way in which then we collect, analyze our population data. Something that has always struck me, now speaking as a town planner, is when I look at the consistency of the enumeration area as a unit. I think for a long time you've been using the sublocation, but that unit of the sublocation is not the same sublocation that was there in 1999, when you also come to 2009, then when you also come to 2019, that unit, unit of enumeration as the sublocation is not the same one, because you may say, yes, maybe I'm talking about Kiwandani sublocation in Nairobi. I may use that example, Kiwandani sublocation. That sublocation over time is not the same sublocation. So when you are trying to analyze population matters for town planning purposes, we have always found that to be a very serious problem. Then it also comes on to when we also talk about the towns, now that as we develop, you know, we have more and more people moving into our towns, and that's why the level of urbanization goes up in that respect. The unit that we call Kiambu municipality is not the same one over time, and that boundary is also not clearly defined over time. You find what one institution agent speaks that the boundary is very different from what the population census team might be using up. So there is always a confusion over that particular item. What's your comment on this? Mary, or any of the presenters?
My quick reaction would be that, you know, there is also the way we have governed ourselves and distributed roles within institutions. And you see, when it comes to boundary and classification of boundaries, you have the IEBC stepping up and saying that's our mandate. Then you do have the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics that's supposed to be telling you, okay, if you are trying to do any samples, this is where you go. So it would be important to revisit this as also part of what they are doing with the relooking at the Statistical Act, so that we see the role of other agencies and other users and factor their needs into the, the system framework going forward. So that would be my quick reactions. I'll be keen to hear from the rest.
Okay. And of the panelists, and I think as we also discussed this, I think as a Q&A question, it's not necessarily that it's the panelists who are responding. I think it's a matter of all of us in the room really contributing in enriching the discussion. Dr. Likaka.
My quick comment is that all these are supposed to be anchored in the law, and how we synchronize our laws so that we are able to bring the right players or the right stakeholders in determining on how boundaries are supposed to be done. The challenge we face is that this has been left to the political class, and that's why we are facing a challenge with planners, with demographers, because they are actually missing when it comes to making decisions in terms of planning. Population is very key for almost all other factors, 99%. So if we don't involve the appropriate agencies in terms of decision and in terms of laws, then we leave them behind. That's why you find even issues of maps, we are having a challenge in terms of developing those clusters for studies, because the administrative ones, you remember how we moved from the issue of districts and the way districts were actually quite limited and you could not really have them created, but then you remember the Moi regime and the Kibaki regime changes came, affected even how other institutions are supposed to work. So you find that actually institutions mandated to do the work are actually struggling to catch up with the political decisions they already made. Therefore, becoming very difficult for us in terms of getting the appropriate data and realigning this data for purpose of decision making in terms of development at the sub-county or location or the lower level, I think.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Ali, for that. Thank you very much. In other countries, if I'm not wrong, it's a requirement that as you move from one city to the other, from one county to the other, you must report and register yourself into the new county or city you have moved into in the next I think 2 days. Is that correct? Is that something that also assists them so that they are able to keep up with changes in population movements in that respect? So that we're not waiting for 10 years to be able to capture any movement, that really on a continuous basis, as people move from one point to the other, they register themselves where they move into.
That happens, if I may chip in, that happens in the Western world, and it's because their planning is centered around residency. So you would have the facilities, the health facilities, educational facilities. So they want to know where you are resident. And in those countries, they therefore don't just rely on the census, but they have what they call the population register, which is like a very up-to-date record of people and where they stay. I don't know what the team thinks about trying to register Kenyans where they live. I'll be very happy to hear views.
Likaka, Kenyans are not very keen to disclose where they live because they don't even know what you want to do with that information. Likaka.
that is very true. That's why we are struggling with even Huduma number and all the other basics. You remember even when we wanted to establish the DCI lab, everybody, including the parliamentarians, actually opposed it. While indeed it will be very good if we have proper planning and everybody, your resident. That's why it would have been very easy with my NSSF number or my ID or Huduma number. You can track me up to my village comfortably for purpose of planning, for purpose of crime management, for any other development. It is easier if actually, but you see now we are not a very honest society. That's why we are not able to activate and implement some of these things.
Okay, thank you for that. Thank you for that. I think then we've spent our day, we have spent our time. If there is no other question, now Lucy, you want to say something?
Yes, I have sent you some of the summary issues that have been raised. Check on your WhatsApp.
Right. As I do that, yep.
Chair, as you do that, can I just make a comment?
Yes, please proceed.
On the issues of development around counties, especially in terms of socioeconomic well-being, counties really need to strengthen. Particularly, we went for devolution because we want a balanced development. If counties can play that role, then they'll actually improve the socioeconomic well-being of the people. This will reduce their uprooting factors that tend to move for whatever reason. And that will also strengthen in terms of mechanisms that can prevent our women and young girls from being trafficked or smuggled. A number of Kenyans were actually going to the Middle East despite those bilateral agreements between Kenya and all countries. They are going through harrowing experiences. And some of those jobs could actually be offered back at home. And this is actually an opportunity for the counties to develop by considering the resources available to them and see how well can they play a role in creating employment and therefore protecting our people from that movement.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I think then as a summary of the main issues that we've been able to pick from our session, and I'm happy that Lucy has been able to assist us summarize and capture them. Number one, now that we're in the era of national and county government, the issue of devolution is so key and is the driving force now and in the future. We note that number one, that devolution is driving migration in counties. Hence the need to have planning within the counties, Okay, strengthening the planning, the county becomes a very important thing that we must do, and therefore being able to work together very closely with the county government. Indeed, under the new constitution, the fourth schedule, the counties are also supposed to have very strong arms or departments dealing with the statistics and population, working together with the national government in that respect. Then the second item that we've been able to pick is that planning for mobility is expensive. Okay, however, mobility drives development. Therefore, we need to invest in this area. The need to invest in this area is indeed very urgent, and this is where we saw the engineer talking about, being able to come up with mobility systems that are sensitive, that are up to date. Okay, instantly that we are able to collect this information along our transport corridors becomes a very important thing. And as the city grows and as our towns grow, it's important that you have got that information at your fingertips if you are able to manage your cities properly in that respect, and also manage transport systems and so on. That becomes important. Okay, investing in this area is key. The other item is working in an integrated manner so that as various sectors and stakeholders, it's important that we work together, professionals, national government institutions, county government institutions, okay, city authorities, and so on. This becomes extremely important, and so that we are able to enhance the delivery of services. Then the fourth item is about migration data. Migration data is indeed very important for planning, and therefore the need to have various institutions collect this data on a regular basis. And indeed, we observe that doing our population data every 10 years, that kind of data may not be useful for effective planning and development of our nation. We need data to be collected in a more frequent manner than that. at the moment, and therefore the need, for example, to have more legislation or more effective legislation to be able to guide that. And then lastly, I see here it's about looking forward to having a balanced development, especially in rural areas, so as to reduce the smuggling and trafficking of persons. Okay, you find people being smuggled from rural areas to Mombasa or other parts of the country because the life in the rural areas may not be as attractive in that regard. So people easily get smuggled for whatever reason. And we have seen this being reported in our country. Thank you very much for participating, and thank you very much for very lively discussion. And I want in a special way thank our panelists for a very educative and informative discussion. And for the rest of us in the team, thank you very much for making this a very attractive session of discussion. And to our hosts, Lucy, thank you very much for facilitating, and may God bless you as we now join the rest of the team in the plenary session. Thank you very much. Tomorrow will be transited there automatically.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, engineer. Thank you, engineer.
And bye-bye. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, engineer.
Thank you so much.
On the chat.
Thank you and bye.
Thank you.
Thank you and bye.
Click on leave the room. Lubanga, you can guide us. I think we click on our right-hand corner to be taken to the next room. We leave this room. Okay.
Okay.